Hey there, Emma here, and in 2023 I hosted a painting challenge called Dogtober where we painted a different dog breed every day of the month. You may have seen some of the clips that I posted on Shorts at the time, just showing like a few little clips from each painting, but I've decided to go and pull out the real-time footage and share them this year so you can follow along if you'd like to. A couple of disclaimers/explainers. The point of the challenge for me was that I wanted to try and loosen up. I'm a realistic portrait artist, and so I gave myself a smaller size to work with as well as a time frame. I'm painting on roughly about A6 size paper, which is pretty small. In terms of measurements, that's like roughly 10.5 centimeters by 14.8 centimeters or 4.1 by 5.8 inches. And I also tried to set myself a time limit of about 15 minutes. I really wanted to challenge myself to loosen up, but you can approach this any way you like. Maybe you'll do it in a different medium or a certain color palette. The options are endless, totally up to you, but you're more than welcome to follow along, and these are kind of like mini tutorials. I do want to point out though that as this was unusual for me and a challenge to me, not all of them are that good. I really struggled in the beginning to start loosening up, and particularly struggled with the long-haired dogs. But you know, it's an adventure and you'll see me progress through the month and learn a lot. If you want to grab the outline sketches, I have put all 31 sketches into a document, a PDF that you can download from my website. I will link that in the description. You'll just need to pop your email address in, which will sign you up to my mailing list, but then you'll get the document with all 31 outline sketches, roughly about the same size that I'm painting. You're more than welcome to print them, trace them, size them up or down if you need to. I'll be working with my usual set of supplies and mixing colors as well, but I will talk you through the process as we go. Let's jump in. Day 6 of Dogtober, we have a border collie. This one is pretty simple in terms of technique, but we are going to need to mix up a color. So feel free, if you don't like color mixing, to use a pre-made black, but I'm going to mix up my own version, and I like doing that because then it gives it a bit of an undertone. So I think a fun way to aim for a black color is to, leave it with a bit of blue or purple as an undertone. And also, if you just wanted to cheat a little bit, you could get some pre-made black, put that on your palette and just mix a little bit of primary blue in it. And then it's at least a little bit more exciting. But I'm going to start by mixing up a purple color, and mine is going to have a bit of a purpley undertone. So I'm adding some primary red to some primary blue. It's not a very watery mixture, which is what I was aiming for because we are trying to paint something black, which means it needs to be quite dark, so we don't want it to be watery or it might come out looking a bit more grey. Now I'm adding a little bit of primary yellow to the side here and also straight into that mixture. So primary yellow, or yellow in general, is opposite from purple on the colour wheel, and that means it's going to help neutralise it. So I've added that in there. Started to look a bit murky, so I've gone and added a bit more blue back in there, just to try and revive it, and I'll add a bit more red back in there as well. And what I'm also going to do is mix up just a tiny little smidge of orange, which is what I put the primary yellow on the side for. So mixing that red through and getting more of a purpley color now. Let's pop a little bit more in there, and we'll also put a smidge of that primary red in the primary yellow to make the orange, and that'll be just the color that we use for the eye. Or eyes, both eyes. Perfect, we are all ready to go now and get started on our portrait. So I'm going to grab my medium brush of the 3, which is about size 6. I'm going to dip straight into this orange, and we are going to paint those little glowy eyes in. So you don't want to fill up the whole space allocated in the sketch, but we do just want to make a couple little small circle shapes. We can leave an inner corner and an outer corner with just blank paper, leave it there, and then that'll stand out once we paint the fur in. You're welcome to paint these a brown or something if you'd prefer. I know my dog's not a border collie, it's a rough collie, and she's got crazy colored eyes, but I just thought that the orange would play really well off the bluey purple of the fur color. I'm dipping into some straight black now that's pre-made. You can also use what you've mixed, but I just figured this is going to be a more concentrated color and will stand out a little bit more. And I'm just painting in the nostrils and that little split down the center of the nose. It's a little off center though, because the dog's not looking straight head on at us. Now, if you've been joining me for the other Dogtober days, you'll be very familiar with this process now. And I'm also just going to use this colour to sketch in very loosely the mouth details. So we're just kind of going along the opening of the mouth there, and we will come back to that later on. But right now I am just going to grab a little bit of watery purple, and I'll just put it off to the side to really water it down on my palette. And I am just going to sketch a couple little markings in that I can see in the white of the fur. So this little kind of divot between the eyes, a couple little spots on the muzzle, just popping them in there, doing some little details that are going to let the eyes dry before we come and paint around them with the dark purple. A couple little shadows on the face under the snout, or sorry, under the nose before the mouth. Just deepening up a little bit of colour there to make it look like it's shaded a little bit, which it should be because it's at the bottom of the face. The light, we are assuming, is coming from the top. And now I'm going to get started with some of this fur. So I am just sketching in a little shadow under the chin there just to define that. And then we are going to, with water, just blend that down into the chest fur, because this is still a white fur area. So we don't want to go too crazy. Hopefully I've learnt my lesson from yesterday with the Bichon Frise and not just making this whole thing completely dark. But I wanted to chisel out that snout and give just a little bit of a colour to the white, because white's not white. There is always some kind of colour in there, and I'm just going to use this purple to shade that as well so it all ties in with the rest of the painting. Blobbing some extra colour down there, spreading it around, and just dragging it down, mopping it up a little bit. And then drying that off. I didn't trust that it was going to be dry enough to start going around it with the other colour, so we are just going to lock it in with the heat gun. I'm going to do another layer over the orange of the eyes. What you could have done is, if you don't have a heat gun or you just wanted to keep painting, you could just leave a gap between the chest fur and the rest of the fur that we're about to start painting in. That would have been totally acceptable as well. But what I wanted to actually do was negatively paint some fur strokes in, so I was going to be painting over that area, so I did need it to be dry, but up to you. So I'm doing these flicky strokes back towards the face of the animal, and we are just kind of negatively painting and cutting in a little bit of fur on that chest, and that's just going to help make it look like a furry animal. With these quick, loose paintings, we don't want to be spending a lot of time painting every stroke of fur, so we look for these kind of techniques to just help us quickly get the point across to the viewer. I'm not bothering to flick fur out on the far side of the animal, I've just made that quite watery, but as I come back into the face area, we are going to continue flicking that into the white fur. So I'm starting to take that colour up close to the eye, being careful not to go completely around the orange shape. We want to leave a tiny little gap. And then as we approach the muzzle, we can flick some more strokes of fur inwards, using just water and a pale colour to take it up the side. And now we're back near the face, the centre of the eyes, or the centre of the face, and just flicking the strokes of fur into the marking that runs down the middle. And taking some back down on the snout as well, just slowly trying to carve this in, coming at it from a few different angles to try and make it look a little bit natural. It can be quite hard when you are negatively painting in something like furs. Sometimes they just look a little bit blunt and cut off. So you might have to go back and forth over that area a couple times just to make sure it's actually going to look like the white fur is sticking out onto that dark fur in natural shapes and doesn't have like a cut off blunt end on it. Adding some more colour to the top of the head, and I'm carefully taking that near the eye. As you can see, still leaving some white gap around it. Coming down from the ear now, filling that all in. Trying to make this really dark so that we don't have to do a bajillion layers. Taking lots of furry strokes out from the ear. Something that you find with watercolour is that a little bit of the colour will evaporate when it dries, and it can end up lighter than you anticipated. And given we are trying to paint a black animal, I'm trying to make it as concentrated as I can. Not across the whole thing, because then I think it gets a bit flat and boring, but certainly in the focal areas, like around the facial features. Coming around the top of the head now, and sketchy strokes. Doesn't matter if you've got gaps between the paint and the paper, it all helps make it look a little bit looser. Jumping on over to the right side now and doing a similar thing. Sketchy strokes into the white chest fur, which ends up making it look like the white fur is sitting on top of the black fur. Carefully cutting under the muzzle, and then we'll bring some of these furry strokes out to the side, and we can make it a bit more shaggy on this side, out to the right, instead of a bit kind of watery like we did on the far side, because that would be going into the rest of the body, but we're not painting that. Onto the right ear, sketchy strokes upwards, and we've got this really cute ear that's sort of bent down, bent over, as opposed to the one sticking up. Very cute. So bringing that one down nice and folded. Filling in the middle. And then really carefully here, because we've got a very small eye, the eye on this side is a little smaller because it's angled off to the right, so we don't see as much of it as we do the one on the left. So taking that up close to the eye on that side, because we don't actually see the inner corner. It is cut off by the snout, but we can see a little bit of that outer corner, so leaving a gap there. Bringing the black fur down the snout a little bit there to help define the edge of that, and continuing to flick these little strokes of fur out, just really rough and quick, giving that folded over ear lots of definition. Dabbing a bit of colour back on the left side. And now I decide I'm going to fill in the nose while we're at it, because nothing's actually touching it that was just done on this layer. So filling the V shape at the bottom first, and then we can kind of fade it around to the top. I'm picking the top left as the highlight again. So watering my brush off and just filling that in a little bit lighter than the rest of it. But it's okay if it all kind of blends into one big value. You can go back and add more, lift more off. And worst case scenario, the whole thing looks really dark and black. You can just go and add a white gouache highlight on at the end. Dabbing a little pupil into the eyes now. I'm just kind of like guessing, praying, hoping for the best. I'm just doing it pretty central into that orange shape and very much at the top, because it does look like the dog is looking upwards anyway. Just popping a very little shadow at the edge of the mouth there, just to give that a little bit of definition as well. Make it look like it's ever so slightly open there. And I'm just going to shade a little bit more of this fur. So I dried it all off and it's looking a little bit patchy, and I just want to make sure a couple of areas are a little bit darker. So I'm deepening up the whole right side near the eye and the ear. We're going to deepen up the ear on this side as well. So I'm just going around the outside of that ear. I'm not going to do the center of the ear because usually it's a little bit lighter anyway. We are going around the eye, super duper quick and sketchy here. I'm really ripping through this. I probably had my timer going on my phone for 15 minutes and realized I was very quickly approaching that. So just roughly sketching in color around both of these areas. Trying to draw attention back to those focal features, the eyes, the nose, and the ear is usually where I try and bring the viewer's attention. And we are going to emphasize that now with some highlighting. So dipping into my white watercolor or gouache you can use, and just dabbing the smallest little dots of highlights over these eyes. Now this is very tricky to do on such small eyes and can end up looking a little bit funny. So if you have to redo it, go for it. If you need to go paint some of the eye color back in over the top of that, go for it. I often find that sometimes I just take it a bit too far on these tiny little portraits. Just underlining the eyes there, trying to make them stand out a little bit more. And now I'm going to actually do what I said and just try and deepen around that highlight on both sides to look like the pupil is, standing out around it. And while I'm there, I'm just going to reduce the severity of that highlight as well. And then what I'm going to do is paint some whiskers in. So you could kind of go two ways with this one. Because there is white fur on the muzzle, you would see black whiskers, but I'm going to use a little bit of white again. And I will make that stand out on top of the black part of the fur, but you could do both. So dragging those out into the black of the fur, trying to make those as thin and natural looking as I can. It doesn't matter if you get breaks in your stroke, it normally looks more natural anyway. And try not to go back and fix them up, because that's usually when I end up making them all blobby and worse than if I had just left them with some gaps in the stroke. Few down the bottom of the mouth and we are all done. That is our border collie. Hope you enjoyed this one. See you in the next one.